Now, the other big story of this day is the Atlantic Division. And we'll talk about the top of it for a bit, but the Boston Bruins all of a sudden make a big splash in the Atlantic by offloading players.
Yeah, and there was some sense maybe that this was coming, but I don't think anyone anticipated it to be this big of a sell-off for the Boston Bruins. Look, Don Sweeney's been the GM of this team for 10 years. The last 9 trade deadlines, he was a major buyer. They're usually trading out the first-round picks and loading up for all those playoff runs that they've had. And here, in the last few days, they unload Brad Marchand, their captain, a day one Bruin in the NHL. You got Brandon Carlo, another black and yellow player. Charlie Coyle. You go down the list, Trent Frederick in deals. And as a result of that, they've really turned over their roster. They get some roster players, guys like Casey Middlestat in that deal from Colorado. They get an extra first-round pick. They get Fraser Minton, a prospect, in the deal from Toronto. And so they have, in a pretty quick order here, started to refresh and retool their roster. I mean, they still have Pasternak, McAvoy, go down the list. But this was a tough couple days in Boston. I think that this has been a lot of soul-searching led to this, and they really made a splash in a bigger way than we would have thought as a seller.
And meantime, the Florida Panthers, the Tampa Bay Lightning make major moves over the last several days. The Panthers, of course, getting Brad Marchand. So the Toronto Maple Leafs try to keep pace in kind of a different way.
Yeah, I mean, Brad Treliving and hockey operations for the Toronto Maple Leafs were strategic, and I think that they executed well leading up to this deadline and how they pulled off the moves that they did. They needed to add a center, so they do that. They get the experience of Scott Laughton, who will be number 3 on the Toronto Maple Leafs. And this is a motivated player who deeply, deeply wanted to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So you get that. And then by extension, you bolster your blue line. And now Craig Berube, the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, has options. Does he play Brandon Carlo with Morgan Riley? Does he play him with Oliver Ekman-Larsson? What you know, though, is what you get in Brandon Carlo is an all-around physical, solid, and at times snarly NHL defenseman, which Berube is going to like. And then you look at what they gave up, right? A couple of first-round picks and Fraser Minton. Well, Fraser Minton eventually might turn into what Scott Laughton is today and next year for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I think the way that they assessed, this is all in if you're the Maple Leafs, right? It's all in. I mean, you give up the first, you give up Fraser Minton. Those pieces weren't going to help the Maple Leafs win this year, next year, or the year after.
And as one executive said today, there's still only one Stanley Cup, right? All those teams near the top are loading up. But, Bob, also some teams trying to get playoff spots, and that includes the Ottawa Senators.
I thought the Senators had a good day. I mean, they're on the bubble. They want to try to make a playoff spot. And if they had sat on their hands and done absolutely nothing, it might have sent a message to their fan base. They were content just to be a bubble team, but they did change up their mix a little. Now, it's not easy to give up a skilled forward center like Josh Norris. There's no doubt about that. And he's best friends with Brady Tkachuk, and obviously that was difficult. And we saw the emotion on Tkachuk with Norris going out of town to the Buffalo Sabres. But Dylan Cousins is a guy that, as much as he hasn't played as well as he can for the Buffalo Sabres this year, still holds a lot of promise in terms of being a really strong two-way center that can play more of a physical game, that is a little more durable than Norris, not maybe as good a goal scorer, but in making the deal that they did with the San Jose Sharks to get Fabian Zetterlund in, giving up a Stopchuk, Noah Gregor, and a second-round pick. They're getting a middle six forward who's got speed. He's a shooter. Yeah. And if you look at it on balance in terms of all the goals you might lose on Norris being gone, I think between Zetterlund and Cousins, you're probably going to pick them up. And don't underestimate the bite and the snarl of getting a guy like Dennis Gilbert on the blue line to replace Jacob Bernard-Docker. So all in all, I really like what the Senators did to try and give themselves an even better chance of making the playoffs.
So as of this season, Boston and Toronto both made the playoffs 8 consecutive years. The Leafs look pretty good. Boston on the bubble and obviously moved out 5 players in Brad Marchand, Brandon Carlo, Charlie Coyle, Trent Frederick, and Justin Brazeau. That's more than 2,500 games played for Boston, including Marchand, 4th all-time, with 1,090 games played for the Bruins.